afternoon or morning or evening, as the case may be. We show this at all times. And the last show, I just want to quickly review what we did, because coming down to the wire, it was a little, it was a little close. But the town meeting was discussed, and the point that I want to make in review of it is that depending on the articles will depend on whether you can get what's called your business done at one town meeting. I think that Michael was in Falmouth. They have representative form government, which normally should work quicker than representative, which we are in the town of Raynham. But it went, I believe, 3 nights. So sometimes one town meeting now, it can go several nights depending on the business and depending on whether they're getting the business done. So that's a piece of the puzzle. I'm going to keep referring to it till I put you to sleep with it, that a town is like a puzzle. There are different pieces that fit into that puzzle. And if you understand the pieces, then you'll understand the town. When I came to the town, I'm going to get to the issues. Believe it or not, we've really not talked, we've more or less talked to people and situations, but we haven't really talked what I consider issues. And so now I'm going to start on some of the issues. Now then, question, McKinnon, what is an issue? An issue is something that is brought up before the town folk or before the Commonwealth of Mass by virtue of the fact that people in that particular community have a concern about it. And so they want it addressed. Now, I'll give you some of the cliches to towns. For every action, there is a reaction, isn't there? And so therefore, there are issues that will occur, and then there are people that don't want those issues addressed because they want to perform those actions. If this shows, and it probably will within the next month, if this shows within the next month, you will see, I'm giving you something that's going to come back on your TV out of your Boston station. Within the past couple of weeks, I'll say, there has been legalized marijuana. I suggested on a this and that it would be proper to have it medically marijuana, but not recreational marijuana. But the Commonwealth in its infinite wisdom have bought both. Primarily, they've had communities able to vote for it that voted for it. These towns now, you try to get them to vote for something again after this, because they didn't think of it that way. They, like when they outlawed our dogs at the Raynham dog track out in the western part of the state. No more dogs. Easy for them in the western part of the state. They didn't have any dog racing, so they voted our rights out, and they got away with it. But the point is that the people who voted for marijuana thought it was a grand idea, but never thought it would come to their town. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them. So anyway, within the last 2 weeks, they opened the initial recreational marijuana. And the medicals were opened, and they're opened with prescriptions in a very quiet way. People go to it and receive it, and it's a much needed and why did it take this long type of thing. But then also, those who like to sing songs like, "For he's a jolly good fellow," "You ain't nothing but a hound dog," people like that, they want to buy recreational marijuana. They want to get in line to do it. And if their state does it, in many cases, their state won't even allow it, never mind their town. And they fly up or they drive up and they get in line for their marijuana. And what do they cause for that nice little town that thought, I'm going to vote against the dogs, there's no dogs in my town, and I'm going to vote for the marijuana, there's no marijuana in my town. Okay, you got no dogs, You also don't see the greyhounds around anymore, do you? But then also you've got all of a sudden you've got a recreational marijuana in your town. Well, if you watch TV within the last couple of weeks, you get a chance to see those people. Now, I'm not putting them down. If they wanted to vote for it, and they voted for it. But I'm going to tell you, if you're a person trying to get the town to vote for something from now on that really isn't popular, you're not going to pass another article probably for the next 50 years, because those poor people now, they're doing something called get out of their driveway. And the cars are backed down for miles, and the people are all in line singing for He's a Jolly Good Fellow, and they're waiting to buy their recreational marijuana. And you're putting colleges now, they say colleges aren't going to allow it. What do you mean colleges are not going to allow it? Why would you ever think, what's the average age of a college student? What's the age that you can buy and therefore entertain yourself with marijuana? 21. Kids get into college at 7, 18, 19, and 20. Why would you allow marijuana on the college campus? For sure they'll have people march on them or something, but it just proves you it's good to know that people who are strange and different are still about. They have a place on the planet. And they'll be in line trying to get the colleges to allow this. Well, it won't be in their town, though. You ask them their town, they won't tell you their town. But anyway, the town that has it now is meeting with its either town managers, selectmen, representatives, and officials who allow and sell licenses for. And by the way, once I get on these kicks, it's very difficult to get me off the kicks. That's why, that's the way it is. Do you know what the tax is on marijuana? Percent? Sitting down. 20%. You know, when's the last time you heard a tax on something was 20%? But here's the kicker. 17% is for the Commonwealth. Now, what does the Commonwealth do for this? Nothing. They will pass a regulation and send it out to Ludlow or something, wherever the town is. You know. That's the end of what they do. What does the town get? That has the traffic for miles, bringing policemen back to direct traffic now on time and a half. As long as the place is open, only 9 to 5, 5 to 6 days a week, they get 3%. The town gets 3%, and the state gets 17% of the 20. Well, isn't that fair? At least you know you're in the right state, don't you? Okay. Now, how in the world does this lead to gravel? Well, you can't smoke gravel, can you? In the little town of Raynham, it was operated, as I told you, very efficiently. It could have been the best run town in the Commonwealth of Mass. It was a well-run town when I arrived. I arrived in the year 1962, and it was being well-run by people who were honorable, honest, and well-meaning. Not a mean bone in their body. And they operated without us new people in town. Well, I happened to buy a house in the new neighborhood in town. It was a farm that was sold with a few acres, and the person who sold it, the family sold it, and they were well known, good people. And it was owned by a gentleman named Campanelli. I don't remember if I forgot that name, but anyway, now I know it, Campanelli. And he built single families, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, small lots. Of course, the town allowed small lots. And it was built on, the word is slabs, meaning the heat was in the floor. It was wonderful. The heats were good. Well, you can't have that 50 years from now. Pleasantfield is the name of it. And it's still there. It's a great place to live, and Catherine and I and family loved it. It's just that we felt we needed more space because it was somewhat crowded. and we moved to a 1.5 bath and things of that nature. And so that's the reason to move away from Pleasantville, because it was a wonderful section of town. But in this section of town came many people from other cities and towns, many from cities. And they were used to having a voice in the government, whereas most of the people in the town of Raynham at that time, they would go to a town meeting, but there were community leaders that pretty well ran the town, and everybody else sat there as they did the other night at the town meeting and said nothing. Well, in came some people that decided they wanted to get some representation. I remember a young man came to our house and he wanted me to sign, and I says, for what? And he told me the issue. I says, yeah, that sounds good. And I said, well, what happens if you want to change it? Well, then we'll do that. I said, well, what do I have to say? Well, you haven't got anything to say. You signed this, and that's what you signed. And I said, well, you're a wonderful person, and I'm sure you're good to your mother and father. I'm not signing anything that signs away my rights, so you have a good day. And so into the town meeting went the group from the new neighborhood. And another time I will talk about neighborhoods as part of the puzzle. And that caused a little bit of a feud. But in this, when I decided to run, and I will also, God willing, well on down after we're done with issues, I will give you some of the methods, and I've had a few victories, one of the methods of how to win offices in small towns or in towns. And so as a result of that, there's a way for people to maneuver and find out what, see, the town meeting doesn't bring it up because the people are quiet at it. There are people in the town who have concerns and they have issues. And when they had their concern and issues in the town of Raynham, I started to go to some of those older neighborhoods, not the newer ones, the new ones, of course, because that was the organization. You can't run without an organization. But I went to many of the older neighborhoods and found out, what's your problem? And the irony of the situation was, very quickly, you can say, how's that got to gravel? Well, let me ask you about gravel. How do you think gravel gets from point A to point B? Well, they take a very big piece of equipment, don't they? And the shovel digs up that gravel, and they dump it not into the back of your sedan, right? Like General Motors is discontinuing some of their cars. They put it in the back of very large trucks. If they're in a good mood, they cover it, and off they go. They have a problem, however. There are certain bridges that weight cannot go over. So they have to stay to the small residential streets, which normally never see a truck. All of a sudden, from these gravel pits. Now I'm going to see if I can find it. And I'm telling you, this is the new me. I found it. I'm going to give you the addresses of where the gravel pits were, some of them now. Elm Street. There's Elm Street off of Route 138. It's North Raynham. Off of that is Ann Street and other streets. This is Hickory Drive, I believe. And there are people who are living in houses now who don't know that their house is located where there was a gravel pit. Hickory Drive, in around there. Church Street. Church Street is off of Route 44, and it goes towards the Taunton River, and there's the First Baptist Church and all. And you go down Church Street, and you go over a bridge, and you come to a road. If you follow it, Church Street, it will take you to a section of Taunton called East Taunton. Someday we may talk about that. It's none of our business, but we probably will. Leads you to East Taunton, which is a very large section of the city of Taunton. Understand the sizes of the community now that you've decided to live in the southern part of Massachusetts. The largest city geographically in Massachusetts is The largest city is Taunton, Mass. The largest town is Plymouth. The second largest is Middleborough. So you could start your car up near the Norton line in Taunton and drive down through Taunton into Middleborough, proceed through Middleborough into Plymouth, and where you came from, you could probably get to New Hampshire, maybe even to Maine or Canada in the time it would take you to go from a section of Taunton, which is on the Norton line, through the largest city in Massachusetts, square miles now, through Middleborough, the second largest, through Plymouth, the largest. And you could drive for over an hour to get to that location. And if you try that and you get it in less than an hour, call Margot and let her know. Do not let me, I do not want to know. She will let me know. Call her any hour. Call her any hour. And then, and anyway, we're beyond Church Street, over the bridge, aren't we? And on the right-hand side there are very nice apartment houses there now. There was a gravel pit. And that gravel pit, to get out of that gravel pit, though, you were not allowed to go over the bridge. So you couldn't. So what did you have to? You had to take a right just before you got to going on to Route 44. You had to take a right, I believe, the street. Now, some of these may not be accurate, but it's no big deal. You get the point. I'm going to call it River Street, just to give it a name. It's River Street. And that big truck with gravel on it, and half the time it didn't have a cover, so it's flowing out, and the truck is razzling down River Street. And it gets over to a street in the city of Taunton, because remember now how East Taunton connects? That connects to a street. On that street, I don't know the name of it, you can look it up if you care. Why would you? But if you did care to look it up, you could look up that street, and you would find on that street there is one house which is listed in the town of Raynham. And believe it or not, for some reason, one of the founders of East Taunton was a man named Richmond. As a result of that, that house has an address called Richmond. And what happens when the very sophisticated delivery person from all those United Parcel and FedEx and all, well, they end up down on looking at that house because they call that super in the sky on how to get to Richmond Street, and they don't get to Richmond Street, which is in back of Shaw's up around there in Raynham. No, they end up down on this. I don't even know if it is. Maybe it is Richmond Street in Taunton. I should look that up sometime. I don't care to, but I might. You never know what I might do. So anyway, that's the street the thing went to. I'm going to tell you, and I will not give this gentleman's name because it's none of your business. But that man told me, he says, Don, he said, if they don't stop that gravel pit down there, those trucks coming down the street, I'm going to lay down on I'm going to call it River Street. I'm going to lay down on River Street and make that truck drive over me. I said, well, that's a bit of extreme, but it is so noted. Citizen, what's his name, is going to sit down in front of a truck if it comes down his street. King Philip Street is the other one where there was on the right and left a gravel pit. There are very nice homes and apartment houses along King Philip, just beyond the landfill now. And that was a very large gravel pit. Tiddicott Road now, and Burnt Swamp Road. Tiddicott Road, Burnt Swamp, there was a huge boulder in front of the gravel pit down there. It was one of the largest gravel pits you've ever seen in your life. And as a result of that, citizens would call up the highway. Eddie Murby was the legendary highway surveyor at that time. And he was the one who put the boulder there. They didn't want vehicles to get down there because this was a commercial, second to none. There was a private road off of it which later I think is called Walter Drive. It may be called that. And that led out to North Main Street. So never mind coming out Titicut to White Street. That came out to North Main Street. It was a huge gravel pit. When I tell you I'm talking about these types of ventures, I may talk to business people who have placed locations in the neighborhoods of the old gravel pit and ask them, how was this? Because I've never bothered. Now, that also is in the area of Catherine's Way, which is down off of, so anyway, Raynham Way. I've pretty well given you most of the gravel pits. Isn't that a lot of gravel pits for a small little town? And I've only tipped the iceberg here. There's other gravel pits in the neighborhoods that I didn't name, but I gave you enough to a sample to convince you that that was real. So what I did was I went to a fellow I worked with, lived in a town called Marshfield. I don't know if you ever heard of that town. There is such a town. Once in a while I may give you a town that doesn't exist to keep the thing moving, you know. There is a town called Marshfield. And in Marshfield, they had a huge gravel removal problem in the town of Marshfield. And they spent a very large amount of money. Now, I don't know. Before this show is over, I'm going to find it, because I know most of you are dying to see this. Here we go for the town meeting now. See that down there? Got that, Margot? Now we're turning it over. It's the complete other side. And I will tell you, you have to take my word for it. I did read it. There are some things I don't read. I know you talk around town. McKinnon doesn't read it. Well, they may be right sometimes. But I read this because the poor town of Marshfield drew up thousands of words on removal of gravel. It must be set back 150, 200 feet. It's regulations as to its hours. And it's, by the way, on a regular basis, it has to go back before the board, and it has to level off the gravel pit. And they have to cover it with a certain amount of loam, and they have to make it picturesque and all. And I didn't do this, well, you're not going to believe me anyway, so I shouldn't tell you. But I didn't do this to put people out of business. But I did it so if they want to maintain their gravel pit, they will look at about 20,000 words, and they will go to a leading attorney on this, and they will pass a law that maybe counteracts it if they're able to get it through the town meeting, or they will comply. Well, I'm going to tell you that in very short order, so they went out of business. Now, how much did they close over at that time? Eddie Murby was the highway surveyor at the time. There was building inspectors and all, and how much they cleaned them up. But basically, I'm going to use the word abandoned. And I will tell you, though, I'm going to call him someday, see if he's still about. There's a guy named Terry who lives, I believe, in Brockton or Avon. And his name is Terry Edwards. And he's called T.L. Edwards is the name of the business. He bought the piece at the end of Titicut Road. And he, as best I know, I'm going to get to him someday. Now, you can take it to the bank. No one will bet on me, but you never know. I might get to Terry. And he's a reputable businessman. He's a good businessman. And he literally adhered to the law, and he planted Christmas trees down there. Donnie Francis, he won't admit it, but used to go down there And different people used to go down and get the Christmas tree, cut them down. Terry didn't care. He had 1,000 Christmas trees there. Beautiful trees. They go down and get their trees. And the place was leveled off completely. So when it came time to build a new middle school, see how it comes around? When it came time to build a new middle school, we checked different territory. I myself had another location up near the Bridgewater line for what I thought would be the Bridgewater Raynham High School. And Bridgewater people told me, McKinnon, you'll never live to see the day that a student from Bridgewater will come over the line and go to school in Raynham. Well, wouldn't you love to have $5 since the Mitchell School fell apart, who come over to Raynham to go to school? Yes, they're still going to school there. The Bridgewater kids are still going to our middle school, and wherever else there's an empty chair, they're going there. And someday, bless them, they're going to build a Mitchell School. And until that day, most of their students are in what we call the old BR High School. It's now Bridgewater's middle school. And most of their students are in that building. But to get back to, you didn't think I was going to, did you? To get back to the gravel removal, T.L. Edwards took gravel out of that place legally, cleaned it up, leveled it off, and he's not out of business, folks. As a matter of fact, he's been very successful. And basically he cleaned that place up. So when it came time for a middle school, well, suddenly we're looking at all those that you don't see it now. You see, one of the problems is it comes down like off a cliff, doesn't it? People who come in their sleds got to be careful they don't go out onto the street, because that is the old, imagine how high that used to be when it was a gravel pit, and then suddenly. So anyway, it's all leveled off. A guy named Joe Betancourt. Now, I've mentioned Joe too many times. He's sick of me mentioning it to him, so I apologize to him and to his immediate family. But Joe Betancourt went to T.L. Edwards because in the business that he was at the time, doing at the time, he dealt with people like T.L. Edwards. He knew Terry Edwards to him was Terry, and he went to him and he negotiated with him. And eventually the land was negotiated for the middle school in the town of Raynham. Eventually it ended up with 2 or 3 other things, the sewer department, the water district for a station, Catherine's Way for a developer. This was all part of Terry Edwards' location. But Joe negotiated at that time for the middle school. And so you see the middle school was presented. Now, I'm not trying to figure out how much it would have cost to straighten that out when the pit was a real pit. And maybe nobody can even give me an answer. So that would be it for the gravel removal. That is an issue. The issue wasn't gravel per se as such. It actually was the trucks coming from point A to B. And many of the people, I will say, operated their trucks in a legal manner, and they covered the trucks. Some of them did not, and that's where it led to, and that's where the rest of the story came down to the road. Happy gravel pit. You want to put a gravel pit, go down to the town, look at this, and you can put one in your... There was a fella who spent most of his life thinking his property was a gravel pit when he went to get one. He found out he didn't have enough frontage. One of the nicest guys in town. I can tell you his name someday if I feel like it. Thank you very much for watching. I remain yours sincerely, has been.